All right, this live event is titled How Business Families Can Overcome the Tyranny of Fame. It's great to have you here. We'll be talking today about how family business fame, reputation, whether it's the local level, national level, international level, can create public scrutiny and psychological impacts on the family members and influence their individual patterns and interpersonal patterns. And I'm joined here by my friend and partner, David Werdiger. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Tom, excited to be doing this. This is going to be a lot of fun. I am a family enterprise advisor. What does that mean, you ask? I help families navigate intergenerational wealth transition, whether or not they have an operating business. And my focus is on things like succession, governance, communication, boards, quality decisions made by the family and family dynamics. But I'm not a therapist. And this is a really important topic now because families need to manage a public brand along with the brand of their enterprise, which they may or may not have. And it's particularly relevant in this age of social media, where many of us are living public lives. Tom?
Thank you, David. I'm a family business psychotherapist. I specialize in business families, wealth-owning business families, and help them with psychological patterns. I help them with interpersonal patterns, individual patterns at the individual level, duo level or couple level, and family level. And I work with advisors. And I'm very privileged to be working with you here today, David, and there are many in the call as well who I am collaborating with, so it's a privilege. David, would you like to share with us what you see in your clients who are impacted by their fame and reputation? And again, repeating, that can be at the local level, city level, state, national. I'd love to hear your experiences with the symptoms and the description of what you see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really important, we had the idea to talk about this from the Beckhams. They're a very public family with a global brand. But the fact is that all families have brands, have reputation and fame. And we use the term fame, but, famous in your community, famous in your suburb, in your city, in your state, in your country, those are all degrees. But fame is, the fact is that you've got a reputation, you've got a brand. And one distinction that I make is the difference between primary fame and secondary fame. Primary fame is the key person or the key people. And that might be in a family, the parents, the patriarch, the matriarch, the wealth creator, the first person who made that surname, a known surname. Secondary fame is something that's, I won't say enjoyed, that's attributed to everybody else who's associated with that person. And that might be siblings, children, cousins. And a lot of it is driven by surnames, which sometimes make it interesting dynamic between males who tend to keep the surname and females who often don't. So that's an important distinction to make, because the people with secondary fame didn't create that fame. They're along for the ride, for better or worse, as we'll discuss. In addition to those things, we've got families that are in perhaps the business of fame. And again, I'll start with the extreme examples, like, the Kardashians and the Beckhams, who are famous for being famous, or famous brand names. But those families, families who have a business that is a household name, they've got a public narrative as well as, the business itself. And that's something that has to be actively managed. And the thing about this is these things can adversely affect the family, because sometimes the public story can become a hidden stakeholder. So you think, who's making decisions here? Is it the family, or is there another stakeholder? We'll call it what people might think. How will this look? Becomes a stakeholder in decisions. And then you can have a number of cascading effects that come from that. You know, in meetings, people become a bit performative. They're careful about what they say. And as soon as people are not able to say the things that need to be said in a meeting, then you get another spillover effect where, you know, instead of the board, or in addition to the board or the committee or the decision-making body, you have these side corridor conversations, little Chinese whispers, you know, what happened in the meeting, and decisions aren't being made by the group of people who's supposed to be making those decisions. They're being made by sub-boards or subcommittees, but not official subcommittees, just little collectives who are exerting power through that. And then you get decision delay, avoidance. You know, do we really have to deal with this now? Oh, this is a huge issue with family, avoidance. And I don't mean avoidance, well, it is similar to, Tom, what you'd call avoidance, but it's just, oh, let's just put this on the back burner. You know, it's not urgent. And that in decision making is avoidance behavior, saying, do we really need to do this now? That's because I don't want to make this decision now, so I'll do everything I can to procrastinate. And procrastination often comes from fear. And things like succession. The succession decision, who decides a successor? Is it driven by optics, or who's the best person for the job? So these are the ways that these factors can affect family decision-making. And now, if that wasn't enough, I'm going to throw in another one, and that's the world of social media that we often live in. And I've started to use the term invasive technology, because these little bunnies, they're such a part of our life, and they are connected to us, and we're cyborgs, and we're connected to millions of people, some of us. And everything we do, a lot of what we do is public. And we've got a connectedness with a lot more stakeholders. People are always online. And that means, by extension, their families might be always online. And the algorithm that we speak of, you know, we're doing things for likes, and the algorithm rewards conflict and high engagement, emotional engagement. So the algorithm scores higher exciting situations that are likely to go viral. So those are the things that I'm seeing in families that are the effect of family brand and reputation. Tom, what's your perspective on this?
Thanks, David. Well, we know from family enterprise literature that a family's reputation and identity is a key part of what we call socio-emotional wealth, that key asset. And it drives key decisions. But I'm called in when these decisions that are made as a result of that socio-emotional wealth are a move away from the best self of that family. In my practice, I simplify things by saying, whatever we do is a move toward our best self, which is our core values, sharpened core values, and who we want to be on this planet. Or a move away from our best self. So when a family is moving away from its best self and letting its reputation and identity actually influence in a movement away from their best self, their decisions, that's when I come in. I don't come in when the family is making sober, values-aligned decisions. And for me, I work bottom up. I look at nervous system impacts. I look at trauma and how decisions are made or how people show up in meetings. I look at avoidance patterns. Really, David, I'm all about patterns. I see patterns. And if a pattern is forward moving, values aligned, I see that. And if it's moving away from our values, I see that as well. For example, micromanagement, a need for over control. That is usually a movement away from our best self. Why do we need to control? It could be that the fear of screwing up, saying the wrong thing, could impact interpersonal relationships within the room because of our reputation, because of our identity. It could be something that I might do that hurts the family. And this creates loads of self-editing, which is driven by that fear or that potential shame we might feel. But again, my clients often avoid discussing their fear or their shame. They'll move into behaviors that might seem productive, but are actually counterproductive, like over controlling, or anger, or dismissal, withdrawal. And of course, there's an empty threat at the individual level. If you do not know who you are, if you don't have a clear set of your own identity, core values, who you want to be on this planet and within this family, then you will suffer enmeshment, it's called in psychology, where you enmesh your personality with that of the family. So the reputation of the family, the fame, is enmeshed within your own identity. And that restricts how you show up as an individual.
Tom, I just want to pick up what I love that term you used, your best self. It's because, you know, when I work with families, we ask questions like, what's the wealth for? And it's not, well, I mean, for some families it is to create more wealth, but I put it to families that the wealth should empower everybody to live their best life. And that means being your best self. And families sometimes lose sight of that. The family's most important asset is its human capital, the people themselves. And if everybody's not living their best life, then what's the point of all the money and everything, all the other good things that come with it if they're internally struggling? Sorry, keep going.
No, I love that. I love that, David. Thank you for that. But you know, these patterns are not just individual, they also occur in dyads, like key duos or key pairs. You see often triangulation, which is a classic pattern when two key people, have the opposite of relational intimacy, when there is avoidance of their relationship and speaking through fear, through sadness, through shame, which are relatable emotions, but instead talk through anger, contempt, or avoidance. I often see triangulation, which triangulation is a concept that is core part of psychotherapy. One of the key theories is Bowen family systems theory. Talks about triangulation when you and I, David, are not able to communicate properly because we avoid each other. We may recruit a third party to provide us with that emotional regulation. It's called triangulation. It's a well-known clinical concept. And by the way, like you've said with social media and your followers can act as your triangulation. You can post something like Brooklyn Beckham did or any family member, and then the followers respond and say, oh, your family is a bunch of mean people. And you say, look, you see that? I can say, David, check this out. My followers agree, you're wrong, I'm right. So triangulation is a classic pattern that I work with. And the antidote to that is having key duos actually work through their avoidance. Avoidance is the root of all issues in my practice, by the way, pretty much.
When you say recruit, it's funny to use that term because it's not as if one person of a couple say, go to somebody and say, hey, look, the two of us are having some issues. Can you help us? That's active recruitment. This is no. This is, I'm venting to you about the person that I should be talking to directly, but I can't. That's
right. Yes. And by the way, in a clinical research capacity, venting is not therapeutic at all. There is only short-term relief. And triangulation might feel like it's helpful, but it actually denies you as an individual self-mastery. And the denial of your own self-mastery, which includes engaging the other through the right emotional communication, effectively erodes your identity as well. It's almost like you need a third party to be full, to be complete. And that's an issue. And within families, interlocking alliances. I use a therapy model called psychodrama, which includes a technique called sociometry. And in sociometry, I get the family to actually fill out a questionnaire about who they rely on most for key decisions, and to see the alliances that form there. And then I'll introduce a concept, which is, if there's a reputational threat, who do you go to and who do you not go to? Just to see where those interlocking alliances are, because we need the whole family to be communicating. That's what I see, David,
Yeah.
in my practice.
You know, you talk about venting being a short-term fix, and I think one thing that our work has in common is, for families, we are giving them short-term pain for long-term gain. We all rush for the quick fix. And I could talk about our phones as well being a quick fix that's a constant fix. But the fact is that these conversations that we facilitate for our family clients are bloody hard.
Yeah.
And that's why nobody wants to do it. But the gain that you get from being able to say things clearly and say things that need to be said in front of the people that need to hear them, including yourself, that's what leads to long-term gain and clarity for the family as a group.
And for the advisors in this call, your ability to actually confront your own avoidance of conflict, confront your own fear of rupturing a client relationship, is key to be able to have these conversations with your clients. And you'll see that your ability to do that acts as a role modeling device for your clients to be able to then engage you and start having those conversations. And I hope today's session, especially this part 3 that we're going to cover now, helps you do that. Now, remember, everyone, please put questions in the comments and we will get to them. David and I will keep talking until about 12:35. So we're going to leave 25 minutes just for Q&A. David, can you share with us your strategies for helping your clients who are impacted by their reputation to overcome that and start thriving?
Yeah. So I'll share 4 strategies. The first one is starting with the kids. And, you know, very often the primary fame sits with the incumbent generation, the parents. Secondary fame is the children. And it's important to raise children in that context and make sure that they're aware that their family and its reputation is a double-edged sword. It's not all privilege. A lot of privilege comes with reputation, the ability to open doors, the way people treat you. But equally, it's often a rock around your neck, because it can constrain you. It can hold you back from being you. And this is, I guess, one of the classic issues for families, is maintaining that healthy balance between the collective and the individual. The collective here is the family reputation. The individual is each individual within the family. And the boundaries, you know, Tom spoke about the people who, you know, they have a brand, but it's not their brand. So they don't own their own identity. And that's not a healthy place for anyone to be. So just being open with kids to say, yes, we acknowledge this is our life, okay? But then at the same time, the important thing is to give them a voice and to affirm their agency and to say things like, you matter, what's important, you are important. And this is such an important thing for every child to develop in their life, to acknowledge that they are an individual. Yes,
by the way, David, just to interrupt, sorry about that, but the fact that so many kids feel they don't matter, I receive them and welcome them in my clinics. And it's the narrative of that shame. I'm not enough. There's something wrong with me. There's something defective about me that I have to then repatriate, help them bring that back into their life, that sense that they are enough. So it starts at the kids level. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. It's something that, if not addressed at childhood, it requires a lot of work when you're no longer a child. And in business families, where the business looms large, or the patriarch and the matriarch looms large, the effect on the children is, oh no, you don't matter, because everything's about them, you know. And you know, I could go into this a lot further. But it's so important how we treat our children, and to give them a voice. And you can give them a voice without giving them a vote. They can sit at a table and be heard. That's so important. Second strategy is boundaries. So again, acknowledging primary and secondary fame, and clarifying consent, and acknowledging, hey, the kids didn't ask to be part of this family. They won the genetic lottery, accident of birth, whatever you want to call it. But setting boundaries and saying, okay, for example, if you've got a well-known surname, maybe we'll say, do not use that in social media. Because, and the kids will say, well, what's wrong? It's our name. And there's nothing wrong with it. And in fact, in family work, I say there's no right or wrong. There's only consequences. If you want to say the things that you might want to say, what are the consequences of airing them in a forum like social media where they can follow you forever? And defining the limits of public interest versus family life. And again, when I say public interest, it's not just the Beckhams and the sports families or whatever they are, globally famous families. It's anybody who's got a reputation, because everybody else thinks it's open slather on your life, and it's not. And it's okay to say, sorry, that's private. Call somebody out on crossing a boundary. Define your own boundaries to say, no, this is a safe space, and I'm going to come back to that later. Next strategy focuses on governance. And as we said before, there's this hidden stakeholder, the optics factor in governance. And my approach to governance is to use a foundation of, first of all, communication, but then shared values and purpose. And that's where I use a fabulous tool called Values Edge, with these beautiful colored cards, and help take the family a process of articulating their values. What is important to them in life? We've all got values, but not that many people go through a process to understand what they are, but also to recognize the extent to which they're living their values, okay? Because we can say, my value is such and such, but if that doesn't translate to how you live your life, then is it really your value? And the other thing we can do there is we can recognize aspirational values, because you've got this deck of cards and people say, oh, but I'd like that to be my value. This is how I've been living my life, but I want to live my life according to this value. How do I do that? And this is a fantastic thing to do with families. It gives them an amazing language to talk about what's important in life. And what's important in life isn't money. It's what we do, the meaning that we have to life, the impact we can have on those around us, closest to us, and sometimes a bit further from us. Understanding where the family brand sits with values. And for some people, their brand is a value. If you're born into a family with a brand, then that brand looms very large, and that may be maintaining the family brand is important. And then we go into the nuts and bolts of an agreed process for decisions that might have a public impact, or where there are external voices. And what we do there is we scenario test. What if such and such happens? How might we deal with this? And again, very often it's a social media post or something like that that goes viral for all the wrong reasons. What do? We workshop it, we scenario. Okay, who does this? Do we just hunker down and ignore it? What do we do if media calls, which sometimes they do? That's the governance side of things, which is about good decision-making by the family, proactively led by the family and the family's key stakeholders, putting them first. And the final strategy is about getting algorithm free. Okay, again, social media, the platforms have an effect on our social lives. They're part of our lives. They're embedded in our lives. And that's why it's more important than ever to have a space, a safe family space. And this staple of the family meeting, that is a sacred space where people can say the things that need to be said without recrimination, where they can listen to each other and learn how to communicate well. And that's communication with curiosity, which is one of the things I coach families and individuals to do. And it's one of the most important things because unfortunately, in the absence of full information, we have a tendency to make negative assumptions. And those are the things that really eat away at us. And that family forum where we step back from this public life is where we can agree on rules for how we want to be when we are public. But that's, the power of pause, of stepping away from that life that's connected to everybody to a life from time to time where we're just connected to the people closest to us, where we can look back at that public life and say, how do we actually want that to be? Because when you're in it, you can't make decisions about it. You've got to step back and be on it. That's the fourth strategy. Tom, over to you.
Thanks, David. From my side, as I said earlier, I approach it bottom up, and I look at three key formats: individual work, dyad work, key pairs, and family work. In the individual side, and I'll share some of my interventions, and I just want to also mention that you're welcome to contact me afterward if you want, so I can walk you through them, the advisors in the call. But please be aware that these interventions can also produce triggers of trauma in those who are undergoing them. So I recommend having a trained therapist with you if you're going to attempt them. For individuals who are coping with that fame, a key intervention I use is empty chair. It's a big part of my individual work. I will have my clients sit in one chair and bring up an empty chair in front of them, and in that chair put fame. And I might even put a second chair there, being the patriarch or the matriarch if they're associated with the pressure they're feeling because of fame. And then I'll have my clients speak to that empty chair. And I've said this before, about 80 out of 100 of my clients go, "This is ridiculous. I'm talking to an empty chair." And then when they give it a go, after the first 2 minutes, everyone forgets it's an empty chair and they recruit all of their thoughts, emotions. It's an incredible privilege to see that happen. And having those conversations, especially as I guide them through emotional lenses, fear, sadness, shame, anger, what they say changes them. They can never unsee what they've seen themselves say and do. They can never unhear it. And I'll also invite them to sit in fame in the chair and speak back to them. Again, most of my clients often think, "This is ridiculous. I'm not fame. How would I know what to say?" And then 2 minutes into it, they've embodied fame and they're actually speaking to themselves. And this type of perspective building is invaluable to help my client as a human see who they are and what they are capable of saying. And I keep checking with core values. So everything they say, I'll check in. Does this align with your core values? Just to make sure that there's no theater that goes off the rails, because I want my client in everything they're doing to be aligned to their values. And by the way, I often, if they don't want to do the empty chair, I will play fame, or in some cases, the patriarch or matriarch. They will coach me on how fame would speak or how the patriarch or matriarch would speak when it comes to reputation and identity. And I will stand in a separate part of the room and I will then speak to them as fame. And literally we will have an engagement, and they know it's acting, but the nervous system is still activated, but I'm able there to hold that space for them and help them develop their voice through that role play and check in with their emotions, whether their heart's beating, whether they want to run out of the room. And these are the patterns that they become aware of.
Tom, I think you mentioned to me that sometimes the empty chair might be a person who's not alive even, and
Correct.
It still works.
That's right. It can be past, deceased, living, doesn't matter, as long as that human in the family impacts them to this day. And that's where a lot of my trauma training comes in, to hold that space in that room. When it comes to dyads, interestingly there, I have recently begun employing a new technique where even with two people, I'll have one of them do the empty chair and have the other key pair member watch, and the witnessing of the other member having the empty chair is profoundly transformative for the viewer. I also like to rewire patterns. That's a key part of what I do, rewiring patterns. And that means, David, if you and I had conflict and we said, to hell with you, and walked out of the room, as a therapist, I would come in and say, what would it be like if instead of walking out of the room, you actually leaned into each other and we rescript different moments based on chain points of the interaction. The rescripting can be uncomfortable, but it changes people because it rewires them in the room. And I use a lot of emotion-based work to do that for the key dyad. And finally, interventions for family. The first thing I like to recommend is, I stole this from Jeff Bezos when he was at Amazon as the CEO. He always had a chair, an empty chair representing the customer of Amazon. And in that chair, he would point his executives to the chair and say, does this suit our customer? Will this help our customer? That's how he promoted a customer-centric environment. In my case, I've adapted that to the reputation chair. I advise my business families, let's have a permanent empty chair in the room during family charter meetings, during governance discussions, during family office discussions, and let's look at it. And whenever you contribute, looking at that chair, is what you contributed values aligned and stated with fear, with sadness or shame, clearly being aware of your emotions, or did you self-edit based on that chair over there? And that's one intervention I like to use, adapted from Amazon. But in a more pure psychotherapy sense, I like to use often miracle signs. I like the family to share with each other what would be a miracle when it came to our reputation, when it came to our identity, to our fame. How will you show up in a simple way that would be different to what you've always done? That would be a miracle to me. And I cannot tell you how often my clients say, I don't know what I want. I know what I don't want. I don't want him to keep telling me about his identity. That's good that you know what you don't want. What do you want instead now? And that's often where my clients and all humans really struggle, is to actually describe the behaviors they do want. But when you're able to do that, it is transformative both for the speaker and also for the recipient. And then once agreed, I get them to do live rehearsals in the room. Actually practice the miracle behavior, if feasible in the room, to start the rewiring process. So these are examples of interventions I use at the individual and dyadic and family level, David.
Great. Thank you. I love these miracle signs. And I think it's very true. We're very good at complaining and saying what's wrong. What would success look like? What would this look like if it wasn't? It just flips things around for a far more positive and forward-looking. And this is, so important for families. Families have got so much legacy, and as I said, sometimes legacy is a burden. And switching the perspective to say, hang on, let's look forward, because we can't change the past, but we can decide as a group what the future looks like.
That's right. And often people who think that psychotherapy is just the past and just trauma are surprised to find out how much of psychotherapy is present moment awareness, present moment interactions, and future pacing based on hope, based on miracle signs. So they're often surprised by that, just how comprehensive psychotherapy is as a discipline. Okay, team, and thank you, David. We've reached the point of Q&A. I think we have a couple of questions. Danny, if you want to share with
Yes.
us what we have.
Yes, we do. We have one from John Williamson, and it says, when articulating family values, do you get individual values input from individual family members? And what next if some of these individual values are, one, significant, and two, oppose one another? Thank you.
Fantastic question. And I love doing the exercise with families because you never know what's going to come out. And that's, but that's the thing. We don't go in to say, you have to be values aligned. Okay. Got a lovely example. Parents, 60s, 2 kids, and both of them were there with spouses. And the father had already semi-retired from the business. One of the kids was really engaged in the business. The other one wasn't. And the way that played out when we mapped the values was just, it brought it home for everybody. That one of the kids was really driven to succeed and to make an impact in the world and in the business, to take the business from here to here. And the other was just really happy and content and wanted to live a life of enjoyment. And there's nothing wrong with that. So we're all individuals. As my father-in-law used to say, just because 2 people came out of the same womb doesn't mean they'll get on. And articulating this, because these are things that families never discuss, and I've seen families have discussions that they've never had before about their values, okay? Because they get no right or wrong answers. And the prompting question for this value stuff is really important. It's about how values have informed decisions that you've made, but then comparing each other's. And we do little discussions for people who have similar values within the family, who have different values within the family. It's a fantastic exercise. It goes for 2-3 hours, and then we have follow-ups and all that sort of thing. And so where values diverge, we talk about it and we acknowledge it, because we don't expect them to have the same values. And sometimes this values discussion might end up with the family saying, you know what? We went into this thinking, we've got to all stay together. Maybe we've got to create a bit of space for individuals. Because one of the big decisions for some families is, do we keep the wealth together or do we split it up? And being driven by this, again, there's no right or wrong answer for that. There's only consequences. And having a bunch of people who are connected by genetic material and shared assets, but see the world very differently, suggesting that they should stay tied together, is not going to have good consequences. So why impose it?
In my practice, David, and to answer John's question directly, I have a private practice and I have my family business therapy practice. And often the work I do is transformative for the client to the point where they realize they actually have different values and they no longer belong with the unit. It happens with couples who come to me to save their marriage. Often the work we do, and I have no vested interest in whether they stay together or not. The only vested interest I have is in achieving their goals. If the goal is to stay together, I work toward that. But often the work is transformative. The identity development is so significant that they both realize we share different value, different people. And it ends up in divorce. And in my family businesses, there's about a 10% ratio so far of family members I work with who actually decide, I don't want to be part of the business. And that's a celebration, because an individual can develop enough of a strong identity where they realize that they love their family, but they are meant for a different path. Their best self is a different path. The family should know about it, and they must exercise that. And that's what I do. It is hard to watch sometimes because everyone's cheering for the Hollywood ending, but often it doesn't work out that way. So I support families who realize that at some point there might be a departure, as long as it's values-based, sober, values-based, and the client realizes that making a values decision does not mean the absence of pain. You can make a decision to leave, and it's full of pain, but in the long term, it is a move toward your best self. And I want to remind everyone, movement toward your best is permanent. It's lifelong. On your deathbed, looking back, did you make the right decision? The one that helps you smile on your deathbed. That is key for my work with my clients.
I want to tell you a quick Jay Hughes story. So a number of years ago, I was at a Jay Hughes. If you've heard of him, good. If you haven't, look him up. Considered the father of family office. And he's telling us about a member of the family, rising generation in their 50s. And Jay said, it looks like you are a custodian of somebody else's dreams rather than a creator of your own dreams. And I just love, first of all, I love the way he's expressed that so succinctly. But secondly, when I heard that personally, I had a bit of a penny drop moment where I suddenly understood why I did everything I did professionally for the last 30 years. Mm. And, you know, this again goes to individuation, being your own person within a family and striking that balance between the individual and the collective. What am I? If I'm subsumed within the family identity, what's my identity? On the other hand, if it's all about me, what have I lost by not taking what's been afforded me, and I don't mean financially, by virtue of my family? Striking that balance, I call it the Goldilocks zone.
And for everyone on this call, I would recommend looking up the term enmeshment or confluence. These are two key terms that refer to a human enmeshed, their identity becoming enmeshed with another person or another entity. And that's how they lose themselves. Or they were never allowed to develop, as David said, total individuation. Enmeshment is beneficial in a global soccer team where you have to be part of the team. Enmeshment takes place. And in a family business, it helps as well in key strategic areas. But if it comes at the cost of your own identity, erosion of who you are, that is dangerous both for the individual and for the family business. Next question. Richard asked a question about differences in gender. I'll just take this one very quickly. Yes, unfortunately for me, I do see often significant differences in gender. I don't think they're biological, or they might be in part, but I think they're much more cultural. And the biggest one I see, Richard and everyone, is, I'll give you an example, people pleasing. I often see my clients, especially females, demonstrating a people pleasing pattern, which is effectively a pattern they learned, all of us did as kids. We said, no, I don't want that. And the parent said, what did you say? You will do what I said you will do. And the threat by the parent causes a nervous system overwhelm because of the survival instinct. And so children will naturally go, okay, yeah, okay, I'll do what you're saying I should do, which is the origin of people pleasing. And if done over years and hundreds of times, you'll see the pattern clearly when someone says yes to even signing off a family charter. And then 6 months later, people saying, she signed off on it or he signed off on it. Why are they so angry? Why can't they just go along with what they signed off on? Because what they signed off on was based on an unconscious response, which is, let me please. And that's where I come in. I will often help my client undo what they have done because they realize that was a people-pleasing response, which they often have blind spots to. The reason for psychotherapy, the biggest reason, is we all have blind spots, enormous blind spots. Free will is overrated. When you see what I've seen in the therapy room, you will understand that free will is overrated and that we often run on scripts and templates. It's hard to watch, but it's critical that we realize those patterns. And yes, Richard, unfortunately, I believe it shows up more in females than it does in males, but other patterns show up more in males. For example, working long hours, that's a shame response usually. Workaholism often occurs more in men, and that is usually an acute avoidance of deep shame because they don't matter or feel that they don't. I hope that answered your question, Richard. I don't know, David, if you want to.
Yeah. I want to respond and also pick up, but first I'll pick up on a couple of things you said about, I love that line about free will. And so much of what we do is driven by the stuff under the hood, the subconscious. And that includes attitudes to money. We've all got a money psychology, a money script. What does money mean to you? And that's a product of our upbringing. And that drives our financial decisions about money. So for some people, money is safety. For some people, money is opportunity. For some people, money is freedom. But for some people, money is an absentee workaholic father. So if you grow up around that and you develop that, and you're not consciously aware of it. So the work that Tom and I do, Tom obviously in a therapy environment, I in a more governance, family enterprise environment, is bring these things into the conscious. Because only after you bring it into the conscious can you actually have that self-awareness and the ability to change it. So there's two things. One, be aware of it. And that's the first step to being able to change it. If you're not aware of it, you've got no chance of changing it. So understanding what money means, what wealth means. And of course, I'll remind everybody, the original meaning of the term wealth is wellness, not money, not financial, wellness.
Thank you. We have
back to the original question, which is about gender. Oh, yeah, totally. And again, very much depends on family culture. Families still tend to be, even in a country like Australia, quite patriarchal, and that means sometimes there are glass ceilings for females within families. Birth order is a factor as well, and for women who, and the other factor is the surname. Sometimes women don't end up having the family surname. So all of these things are factors. So gender is quite significant.
Thank you, David. Narelle asked a question about venting is not helpful. How come? Narelle, venting socially, I don't comment on social or moral judgments, but from a clinical perspective, venting is unfortunately a replaying of templates that we've identified growing up of how people deal with their core emotions. There's four big core emotions that if you can communicate through, if you can talk through them and withstand the physical impact on your body, you will heal, you will relate well. Joy, sadness, fear, and shame. Those are the big four. They are body signals that keep us surviving. They're critical biological signals. And venting is usually, almost always, a secondary emotional approach. Anger, contempt, withdrawal. Those three, the big three avoidance mechanisms, anger, contempt, withdrawal, represent what we see with venting. Because they're avoidant moves, we have to think about, what are you avoiding? What you're avoiding is a deep-seated fear that is hard to sit with, or shame, or sadness, but because they're so dangerous to sit with, because growing up they were smacked out of you, verbally or physically, we move to secondary emotions. They're the refuge emotions: anger, anger, contempt, withdrawal. So venting has a very brief value, like a salon shampoo. It lasts for about 5 minutes. It's pleasurable, but there's absolutely no clinical benefit. Unless you're having a mentoring session or a consulting session where you're working out strategy for business, but on an emotional, interpersonal level, venting, in my opinion, in my work, helps 0%, aside from a 5-minute feeling of pleasure. It actually continues your lack of self-mastery. And that self-mastery is required for you to actually shine. And that requires actual engagement with the person or entity that is causing you to vent about. That's my opinion.
I'm going to talk to Jason's question. So Jason's question, enmeshment is interesting. You do see some business founders struggle through transitions or exit with their identity linked to the business. When is the right time to address this? If you work this out partway through the process. Identity and family business are so important. And I've founded several businesses, I've sold several businesses, and I went through this myself. The business is often an embodiment of your personal values. You hire people around you who are similar to you, and you create something that is a whole being. And it's all about you as the founder. And families that are headed towards an exit, it's the decision. So if a family's looking to an exit, they might hire McKinsey if they wanted to throw away a lot of money, and McKinsey will help them with the financial aspects, with the operational aspects, with the structural aspects of the business. But what they won't help them with is the emotional aspects, okay? Because the business is a financial asset for the family, but it is tied to the identity of the family, and particularly the identity of the founder. And if your business is everything, you've got to ask yourself, what am I without my business? And to Jason's question about timing, it is very important to do this early enough in the process so that you are prepared for that moment, which is the liquidity event, the change of control. Because the last thing you want the day after settlement is for the person, the founder, to have a big hunk of liquidity in their bank account and a matching hole in their heart because they've felt a loss. And I experienced this when I sold one of my businesses, my last operating business last year. And I had and I've been preparing for 10 years for what I was going to do next. And I had a bit of a moment where I thought, oh, gee, they don't want me anymore. And then I reflected on that and I said, hang on, I've been working on this for 20 years to make sure this business is worth something to somebody else, first of all. And second of all, to know what is next for me, what my next chapter is. And that's the work that founders need to do and that families need to do, to individuate and to say, yes, I am more than this business. But most importantly, what comes next? Because it is the fear of the unknown of what comes next that holds back families from making this transition. And that applies in general to everything, whether it's wealth transition, whether it's selling an operating business, all of these things. Uncertainty of the future is what makes us procrastinate. It makes us unhappy.
And I would add to that, David, that if a client of yours is thinking of selling at any stage of the process and they're stalling your work as an advisor, from a psychotherapy perspective, specialist to family business, I haven't used this yet with a business family yet, but if it occurred, I would. And that is, I would invite my client to have a session with themselves where they're engaging in grief, free mourning, where they actually, as if the event has taken place. In psychotherapy, it's called pre-mourning, where you identify that there will be a loss, maybe a parent is ill, and you actually have a quiet afternoon where you engage in pre-mourning rituals so that you're actually building resilience for what takes place. It's the same with a business. I also have done this with private therapy clients where they're trying to figure out, do I stay or do I go? Do I move to Sydney or move to Melbourne? Do I leave my spouse or stay? Whatever it is, I'll interview two parts of them. I'll interview you having sold the business 12 months from now, So, so it is you 12 months from now, let me interview you. How's life? And the other part is you held on to the business. How's life? It's been 12 months since I last saw you. That might sound ridiculous because how the hell do you do a future self 12 months from now? Again, a lot of my clients go, I have no idea. It is in 12 months. 2 minutes into it, they're literally talking as if it's been a year. So these are examples of interventions that I recommend because they tap into something a lot deeper and allow for the expression of things that have been unsaid or not even known.
So, so to that, one of the things, or a couple of things that I do, one is I employ the construct of the rite of passage, and this is very important in transitions of all kinds. You know, it's usually associated with becoming adults, but equally it applies to death of the patriarch or matriarch of the family, a transition from operating business to non-operating businesses. These are transitions, and rituals give us comfort when dealing with those transitions. And of course, the other thing is, you know, is around coaching people on designing a future for themselves. I don't do 1 year, I use 5 to 10 years usually, and for families, 25 years. But imagining the future and having tools for the family to do this that engage not up here, but here, because that's the important stuff.
David, thank you so much for elaborating with me today. Team, that's our session today. I will share the recording through my newsletter if you are part of my LinkedIn newsletter, but you can also contact me privately and I'll share the recording with you. And feel free to connect with us. The links are in the chat to our LinkedIn and to our practices. It's been a privilege. And David, thank you so much for working with me, and thank you to everyone for showing up.
Thanks very much, Tom. This has been everything I expected and more. I hope everyone else enjoyed it and got something out of it.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, guys.